The British government used the general public as unwitting guinea pigs for biological and chemical warfare trials during the Cold War. A new research by the University of Kent has shown that hundreds of thousands of ordinary Britons were subjected to mock biological and chemical warfare attacks launched from aircraft, ships and road on a much greater scale than previously thought. It's been revealed that British military aircraft dropped thousands of kilos of a toxic chemical on civilian populations in several locations. Chemical tests were carried out in the London Underground system in 1964. Over 14,000 unsuspecting soldiers were also subjected to similar tests. Experiments considered to be too dangerous to be done on the British soil were carried out in colonies like the Bahamas and Nigeria. The correspondent from London, Mohammed Walji, joins us right now to tell us more about this. I mean, what can I say, Mohammed Walji? Reading this again, it almost sounds too unbelievable, bordering conspiracy. But tell us, is this really something that happened? And how could this have happened in the first place?
Well, absolutely, Kaveh. This did definitely happen. We always knew that something did happen, but we weren't aware of the drastic scale that it did take place in. Now, more than 750 secret operations took place over an 11-year period between 1953 and 1964. And in that period, thousands of kilograms of chemicals were released on the general population with largely unknown toxic potential. That's what's been said in the recent book that's been released, and these were released on civilians. Now, as you also mentioned, that they released chemicals or bacteria on the London Underground. Now, if you're aware, if you know people from London who have used the Underground, you can see that the Underground is a very confined space, and releasing a chemical in that, or a bacteria in that kind of space, is very dangerous. Now, at the time, they say that they weren't aware of the risks of the bacteria that was released. It was called Bacillus globigi, excuse my pronunciation of it. It was released on the London Underground, and they said there was no real risk to it, but it appears some of the scientists had some reservations about doing a test like that, but the tests went ahead regardless. And now, over the last 10 years, we now know that this particular bacteria does have some serious side effects of fever, food poisoning, and even in some serious cases of septicemia. Now, one of the more serious cases that we need to look at actually was the release of the plague bacteria over the sea. Now, the idea to release it over the sea was that there was a less of a risk involved, but then there was a bit of panic when a fishing boat potentially went through the plague bacteria, and there was a big concern that these fishermen on board would have contracted this dangerous illness. There was also concern that if the wind changed direction, this plague bacteria could have been blown onto the shores of the United Kingdom. And as again you mentioned, Kaveh, then after this they were worried and they moved the experiments off the UK soil onto places like the Bahamas and Nigeria. Also, if we look at the irresponsible and somewhat unethical and potentially illegal actions when they used soldier volunteers to test some chemicals, in the book it says that these soldiers were probably misinformed about what they were really testing. They probably thought they were testing for a common cold bacteria, when in reality this was something far more serious. So we can see that the methods and methodology used by the British at the time was somewhat unethical, and it seems illegal.
As George Galloway says, you couldn't make this up. Thank you very much, Mohammed Walji there, correspondent talking to us from London.